Hello and welcome back to The Drag Detective, where today we are going to be breaking down the very confusing and very divisive edit of Suzie Toot. I would say she is the most complicated. I don't know. Honestly, I feel like everyone that made this top 5 is like complicated in their own ways, but the edit gives all of them very complex edits. Here is the completed edgic chart for the season. If you've been following me on Instagram, then you know exactly what this is. And as you can see, everyone in the top 5 got a very complex edit. Most of them were complex personality mixed. Suzie, I gave over the top 2, and we'll get into all of the reasons why I did that. And Jules, I was between complex personality mixed, but I ended up giving her complex personality positive because I feel like most of her story all season long, we were supposed to be like either feeling bad for her or taking her side or sympathizing. So everyone here has got a very complex edit, but only one of these 5 has an over-the-top edit, and that is Miss Suzie Toot. And if there is anything that I've learned from the season, it is that everyone has a different opinion on Miss Toot. She has super fans, she has super haters, she has people that wanted her to win, she has people who thought she should have gone home ages ago. Like, everyone feels very differently about this queen, and I think it is because she is shown in so many different lights, and her edit is not just one thing. So we are going to go through every episode, break down all of her moments, break down all of her storylines, and come to the conclusion of what was the show trying to tell us about Suzie Toot, how did they want us to feel, and we're going to get a couple opinions from some tutors, because if you've listened to the podcast, you know I'm not the biggest Suzie Toot fan in the world. So just to keep this a fair and unbiased video, I do have some tutors that I will be interviewing, getting their thoughts. I'm going to have some anti-tutors that we're going to get some thoughts from and just get a very dynamic and complete picture of what people thought about Suzie Toot on season 17 as we break down her edit. But as we know, Suzie Toot went home. She lost out on the money. But speaking of money, so recently I discovered that I had been paying for the same streaming service twice with 2 different emails. And I'm sure that we've all been there, and then we're all mad at ourselves that we let it go on for as long as it did. So if you have ever been in this situation, Rocket Money is here to help. Rocket Money is an all-in-one finance app that helps you cancel your subscriptions, lower your bills, and manage your money better. I love using Rocket Money to cancel unwanted subscriptions. Once you connect your bank account, Rocket Money identifies all of your subscriptions in a single list. And from there, you can select the ones you don't want anymore, and Rocket Money will be able to help you in just a few taps. So no more paying for the same service twice. And if you're a typical Gen Z loser like me, you hate talking to strangers on the phone, and you don't know how to advocate for yourself. So when my internet bill started rising like crazy, I had basically accepted defeat until Rocket Money came to my rescue. With just a couple of taps, you can have Rocket Money negotiate your bills for you, whether that be your cable bill, your internet bill, your phone bill. No more need for those stressful customer service calls. Let the negotiators at Rocket Money help you get the lowest rate possible for your bills. If you want to try Rocket Money today and get in control of your finances and unlock even more features with premium, go to rocketmoney.com/detective or just go to the link right below in my description. Thank you so much to Rocket Money for helping me with all of my finances and for sponsoring today's video. Before we get into the analysis, I do just want to say and point out, not that I should have to, but some of you bitches don't know how to act right. So we are going to be talking about an edit, about a person that we saw, I don't know, maybe in total an hour or 2 hours of in confessional and things when they were on set for, I don't know, like 950 billion hours. But we have a very small picture of what they were like, how they acted, what they said on set, and that is what we're basing this off of. It's basically a caricature of this person. So this is no hate to Suzie. She was one of the most, if not the most interesting person to watch on this season. And even though I might have some harsh words for, things that she said or things that she did, I love watching people that I'm not rooting for on TV. Like, I love when there's someone I'm rooting for and there's someone I'm rooting against. and I just so happen to be rooting against Suzie on this season, but that doesn't mean that I think she's a horrible person. I know that is not an implication of her in the real world, and I just had fun watching reality TV, and then I turn off the TV, and I don't send them hate or any kind of negative stuff. So don't be weird and act like a normal person. For once. Please. We're begging. Now, looking at the promo, I remember being really confused when Kayla and I were doing the rigged recap for the promo because everybody was obsessing over Suzie. And I was like, that's kind of strange. I thought she had a good Meet the Queens. I feel like we got to know a lot about her, but it wasn't, the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life, like a lot of people were saying. And I remember saying to Kayla, because I didn't know spoilers, watch her make the end, and people are just hyping up the girls that make it to the end, which that's exactly what happened, because if you're looking at the promos, besides Onya, who just didn't have the best look, everyone else that made it to, the top 5, even the top 6 with Lana, was getting so much hype and praise. And not saying it's not deserved, just saying that some of you are weird. And a lot of people pretend like they don't know spoilers, but are, episode 1 being I think the top 4, I feel like something's telling me it's going to be Lexi and maybe Jules, and I could see Anya there, and for the last one, is it Crystal? No, it's Sam Star. That's what I think the top 4 is, but that is just my opinion. I don't know any spoilers. Meanwhile, they're literally on, the Drag Race T Reddit, and they're like, oh, the girls will never know. But Suzie had a really good Meet the Queens. People really liked her. I remember I was not super high on her look when we recorded the podcast, but even a week later, I was like, wow, I was wrong. This is a stunning promo. When you look at all of the details, her makeup is so good here. So, Miss Toot, I would like to apologize for any negative remarks I said about this promo. I think I didn't say anything negative. I was just whelmed. But I am impressed at this promo. And getting into the premiere episode, it is, of course, the talent show. And Suzie walks into the workroom and quickly sets herself up as the weirdo. She even says, I'm a musical theater queen, I'm a weirdo, and I'm the name on everyone's lips. And I remember being like, you're the weirdo. Okay, but we have Arietti who walked in wearing this, and we have Lydia Butthole Collins who walked in wearing this, and then Suzie Toot is I'm kind of just weird. And I remember kind of keying with people about this and being like, is she really that weird? Who told her she's weird? And we'll get into it that apparently people really do think she's weird. But to me at this moment, I was like, what's weird about this? Lucky Stars walks in. She's like, yeah, Lucky and I, we're the 2 weirdest queens in Florida. And I was like, Lucky, weird? Yes, I see it. But Suzie Toot, I'm not so sure. But we get to definitely see right off the bat this 1920s flapper inspiration that she has into her drag. And not just flapper, but every kind of thing you could pull from the 20s, she likes to use in her drag. And she says early on in this episode, before anyone has even done anything, said anything, she says, I'm not sure the other girls will appreciate my perspective on drag. And from what I was gathering from all of this was, even though no one had given her an indicator there that this was going to be the case, I feel like she's gotten this probably a bit in her own scene, and that's just what she's come to expect from how other queens and other drag entertainers are perceiving her and what she's doing in her drag. And I said this on the podcast at the time, I feel like she kind of manifested this for herself maybe a little bit. It's like a self-realizing prophecy, you know what I mean? If you're going into a situation and you're expecting a certain result from people already, you might already kind of be treating those people like they've said these things, but they haven't said anything, you're just expecting it. And I feel like with how much the cast, it's not that they didn't love Suzie or didn't like Suzie, they did get along, but everyone was definitely over Suzie for a lot of this season. And I do think it might be because of this self-realizing prophecy of her just kind of expecting them to not like her. So that might be some of the energy that she had brought early on. And even after she slays this episode, she doesn't slay the runway, but she slays the challenge with her comedy tap dancing performance. She wins the lip sync to Woman's World. And then she says, I think I gagged these girls a bit, and now they can finally see I'm a threat in this competition. Well, how does she know that they're gagged? How do they know that she wasn't a threat? And we've only been here one episode. And so to say, like, they finally see me as a threat, it's like we all just got here. Like, everyone is still sizing each other up. Everyone is still trying to see who's going to be the flops, who's going to do well. And that's kind of another portion where I'm like, I think that she'd maybe been making this storyline in her head of what was going to happen. And whether it was going to happen or not, she was going to pretend like it was going on. Because really, the only person in this entire episode that says anything slightly negative about Suzie is Jules Sparkles, who is kind of like, she walks in and she's like, who's this 1920s boop boop badoop whatever. And it's not that she says it's bad, it's not that she says she doesn't like it, but there's just a tad little bit of like, what is this 1920s inspiration? And then when she loses the lip sync, she said that she never expected to lose to Suzie. So we know one person in the room was saying this, but she didn't say it to Suzie outright, and it's not like they had, you know, plenty of confessionals of all of these queens saying, not this bitch gonna come in looking like a Betty Boop wannabe, ugly ass bitch, like you would think they were based on Suzie's confessionals. Now, is there stuff that could have happened that we just didn't see that was influencing this? Sure, but I also just feel I got the vibe that Suzie was expecting it, and so she was going to run with that. And I think this is where we see the girls get a little bit like, about Suzie, because she does win the first episode, and I think that they can all see it in her face that she may think she's a little bit better than everyone now. And even going into episode 2, she says, the score is 0 to 0 to 0 to 0 to 0 to 1. Eat that, ladies. Like, it's very like, ha, in your face, I won and you didn't. So I feel like from the jump, this might be where people were a little bit, I don't want to say off-put by Suzie, but there was always a bit of distance between the cast and Suzie, and I think that is where it came from. But in the second half of the premiere, she's really not a factor in it much. She says that she's kind of tempted to be shady in the Rate a Queen, but goes against it, probably because the others weren't shady towards her. But I was kind of surprised in this episode that she won the first week, but really was not in this week much, when other queens, like Jules, were all over this episode despite not competing. And this kind of like smaller edit for Suzie continues for the next couple of episodes. In episode 3, it is the first design challenge. It is the Monopulence challenge where they all get a different color and they have to make these opulent looks inspired by Monopoly. And she tells us that she is scared of the sewing challenges, that she is not a seamstress, but she does never end up in the bottom or even low for these design challenges. She's always like competent, but she's not like Arietti, basically. But again, she's kind of saying things that no one else is really saying, so you're like, okay, where'd you get this from, Suzie? Because she says that it would be cute to send home the girl who won a challenge in this episode. So it's kind of like she's expecting these girls to all be sharks coming after her. But, like, where is that coming from? It's not like we're getting a ton of confessionals at this point saying, Suzie's got to go home. I hope Suzie gets the boot. Get Miss Toot out of here. Like, we're not seeing that. We're just getting the side of Suzie expecting that from the girls and kind of just like pretending that that's the reality. And again, it could have been. We have not seen everything that happened on this season, but from what the edit is telling us, that is not the case yet. Episode 4 is the Bitch I'm a Drag Queen challenge, where the queens basically get into teams and they self-produce their own comedic commercials. And really all we see from Suzie this episode is that she wants to get a solo part, because there's like parts in this that have duos and then there's parts that are solo, and she wants a solo part so she does not get outshined. She does great in the challenge, and this is really where I think the queens start noting that, okay, she is a threat, and we get a couple confessionals of people being like, Suzie's really, really doing well. She's going to be one to watch in this competition. And she gets a high placement in this episode, but loses to Onya Nurve, which will end up being kind of a running theme for her storyline this season. But this is one of my favorite Suzie moments in the season, her in this challenge doing the like rocker chick moment. And it was a nice like departure from the Betty Boop of it all. You know what I mean? Like it was like, okay, she can do other things. Then we move on to episode 5, which is her second and last challenge win, which is crazy to say, but it is the RDR Live Comedy Challenge. And Suzie has a huge storyline throughout this episode, as most people who win a challenge do. So she's really fighting for this babysitter role in RDR Live, which is basically like RuPaul's babysitter who's claiming that every one of RuPaul's catchphrases that she says now came from her, and RuPaul like owes her, and it's really funny. It is probably the best role in this entire challenge, and it was really smart on Suzie to acknowledge that, recognize that, and fight for it, which she really didn't have to fight that hard. She was like, I want Rhonda. And as we see, the choosing of roles becomes like a point of contention for Suzie throughout the season. But for now, she gets an easy pass. She gets what she wants, and she moves on. But she is sharing this scene with Crystal Envy and Lexi Love, who are doing the weekend update. And then it kind of cuts to Suzie being interviewed by them. So the three of them are rehearsing, and this is the first moment where we're seeing that Suzie is a bit of a control freak and maybe can't read the room at times. And this is something that we'll see a couple times throughout the season. A really funny moment is during the monologues with Jules, but we'll get there later. But basically, Lexi and Crystal, they're like spitballing ideas with Suzie. Lexi's coming up with all these ideas. And Susie's basically just like, no, let's not do that. No, I don't think that fits. I don't understand why you would do that. And Lexi is becoming more and more agitated and upset as everything that she is suggesting just gets shuffled to the side by Suzie. And this is also kind of where we're seeing the storyline with Lexi and Suzie form, which is probably the most complex and focused on relationship on this season. And as this episodes go on towards the end of the season, we get to see like really where they're both coming from, specifically where Lexi is coming from with her dynamic with Suzie. But this is really the genesis of it, because Lexi is like, Suzie, you're annoying me and you're making me mad because you won't let any of my ideas through, which is funny because the scene is really between Lexi and Crystal, and then Suzie comes in. So the fact that like Suzie is like telling them how to do the scene when she's not even involved in that part of it was kind of, there was some gall that was needed there. But like I said, we'll have other moments where Suzie does do this. We also see that the Kumbaya girls are kind of exposed in this episode, where this is Lexi and like her clique's thing of basically the girls that can't hang. You know what I mean? There's the ins and the outs. And Suzie is with the outs. And she says that Suzie is the CEO of the Kumbaya Girls, which means basically that Suzie can't key. She doesn't want to hear the shady jokes. She doesn't want to hear any critiques on anything she's doing. That's what Lexi is getting at. Which, well, from what we've seen from Suzie, it makes sense why she would do that, since she already kind of came in thinking that these girls weren't going to fuck with her or her drag. So, of course, she doesn't really want to hear it if they're going to be like, Suzie, what was that look? Or Suzie, what was that, makeup? But she does get dubbed the CEO of the Kumbaya Girls. And this is a real turning point episode for Suzie, because it's starting to show that a lot of the other queens just aren't fucking with her drag, but also not really with her either. And we'll see as throughout the season goes on that they do grow closer to her and they do kind of respect her and like her more later. But in this episode, this is Suzie and Onya versus the world, because she comes out for the Tickled Pink runway in this 1920s pink clown-inspired look, and this is actually referencing like an actual look, and this is a wonderful runway. I don't love everything that Suzie Toot has done on this season, but this is a solid, fun, awesome, polished runway, and the girls hate it and are shocked that the judges like it. And this is where I'm like, Suzie, maybe you were right, because there's no reason to dislike this look. There's absolutely no reason. And even Lana Jarre is like, if I came out in this look, the judges would have read me for filth. But because you're Suzie Toot, they like it. And I just disagree with that. I feel like anyone could come out in this look and it would have been praised because it's just objectively a great look. But I do think at this point the girls were kind of maybe annoyed with some of Susie's behavior. They were over the fact that she was killing everything and they were trying to knock her down a peg. And it didn't really work because you have Onya Nurve in Untucked kind of siding with Suzie and being like, she looks fantastic. Don't be mad that the judges like it. Just step up your own shit. And Suzie ends up winning her second challenge, which again, we go to her in confessionals and she's like, first to get 2 wins, take that, motherfuckers. And like, there's definitely like an air of arrogance. You know what I mean? There's like I deserve this and you guys are going to be mad. But at this point, I'm kind of siding with her a bit because they were being nasty to her. They were being like, tearing apart this perfectly great outfit. So that kind of energy from Suzie, I'm like, that's warranted. Like, that makes sense to me. So this really was a huge moment for Suzie Toot to be kind of like made fun of by everyone in Untucked and kind of made to be seem like she didn't deserve all the praise she was getting. But she ends up winning the challenge and she is ahead in the track records and she will let everybody know it. The next episode is episode 6. It is the Sickening Ball. And this is an episode, it's kind of like a cool down episode for Suzie, where she's really not featured much at all. We already know that she doesn't love sewing, so we don't really need to reiterate that. And she ends up being safe, so there's not really a reason to focus on her when we have the like Lexi and Anya drama, and like Lana Jarre is struggling, and all of these other storylines we need to focus on. So Suzie, nowhere to be seen, but I do want to highlight that her octopus look is one of my favorite looks of the season, and potentially, no, this is definitely in my top 3 Suzie looks on the season. I love this look. So, just taking a temperature check right now of her storyline so far. She came in, she started killing it. She was expecting people to not get her drag, and whether that was a self-fulfilling prophecy or not, that is what ended up happening. But because the queens are being mean and not being fair to Miss Toot, everyone is basically on her side at the moment from the audience perspective. But things are going to take a very quick shift in the next episode. But before we talk about the Snatch Game episode, I did want to introduce a couple of tutors and kind of get their opinions on Suzie and why they fell in love with Suzie. And they'll be checking in throughout the rest of the video to give their own commentary on the ins and outs of what happens on Suzie Toot's journey. So I'll let them take it away. Okay, so we have now Fabrielle, who is one of my favorite people to follow online because you are an Ariana superfan and are constantly doing looks inspired by her, as am I, a huge fan. And you are so stunning. So thank you so much for coming.
I'm so honored to be on. I have been a fan since the original intro. Okay.
Which people apparently miss.
It was but the new one is so beautiful. So
yes. So I hear that you are a Suzie Toot fan. What attracted you to Suzie as a viewer?
I think just being a musical theater major, I love anytime the theater girlies come on. So like the Jans, the Plasmas, I immediately love them. So that was what initially got me into her. But then whenever she talked about loving Haley Williams too, I also was like, wait, hold on. Let me get into that. So I don't know, just her energy and her inspirations really drew me into her.
I'm Thumali, that's Thumali. I'm the founder of Wayward World Studios. It's a channel that showcases queer storytelling, and on that channel I host a podcast called The Rewind, and it's highlighting the best that queer nightlife has to offer, from drag queens to drag kings, burlesque people, DJs, and all in between. Some of them have been very independent, and some of them have been on television. Next week, we're going to have Asia Consent on the show, which I'm very excited about that. But recently, we have also had Pi, we've had Aurora Gosmic, Sigourney Beaver was on last year. So the channel, it's very small right now, but it's gaining a lot of recognition. So please go watch the Rewind on Wayward World Studios on podcast services everywhere: YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. I really loved how unique she was. I mean, like, she was definitely someone that was entirely different than in comparison to the rest of the cast. I think the rest of the cast had their own quirks, but it was still drag. I think Susie brought something a lot different. You don't really get to see like that a certain period when it comes to drag. At least not that I can recall when it comes to Drag Race in like all 17 seasons. She has a very specific point of view and a very specific, reference point.
I really like resonate with her, like with her character, the fact that she is like very cerebral, very intellectual. I think that I feel sometimes like to be that way, and I know that sometimes that can be also appear as like arrogant or cocky, and this is also why, like, this is one of the reasons why, like, my opinion didn't change when the edit actually changed. And oh well, and also especially the fact that she was like being misunderstood by the other queens. So like that really resonated with my, like, feeling as an outcast, feeling as somebody that's, it's been not understood. And
Okay, so obviously we had a lot of people on that loved Susie. So now I had to bring on someone who didn't love Susie as much. My sister, Mandy, who has watched every episode of the season with me at the bar, at the club. Mandy, what has kept you from loving Susie as a fan of the show?
I will say I'm never really a big supporter on the show of like the big like Broadway theater queens. So I knew from like the second I saw her, I was like, this is not my cup of tea. I'm not gonna like her, or like I'm not gonna like what she's giving to the season. And I feel like she's confident. We love that. But I think she can also bring down other queens as she's trying to hype herself up, which I don't appreciate. I think she should be an area of love and acceptance and hyping each other up. I feel like that's not the energy that she's giving.
So they will be here throughout this video giving some insight, but now it's time to talk about the real turning point in Susie's arc, which is episode 7, the Snatch Game. This was a rough episode for Susie because the last couple of episodes had kind of been setting her up as this underdog. She was having this kind of jinx moment where people weren't understanding her drag. They were trying to put her down because she was doing so well, and we were really getting on Susie's side. And I feel like this one particular episode kind of shifts you away from Susie's side and shows you maybe some of her more difficult moments, while she was there. How do you think that the show wanted Susie to be perceived by fans?
I've spoken about this with Mira on Mangled Morning before, but I feel like the show just does not know what they want to do with Susie. I feel like they wanted her to be one way, and then they wanted to give her the delusion edit, and then like I feel like they just never found out what they wanted to do with her.
I think they want her to be the villain, and all her confessionals all season very much like, oh, I did this. I did so well in this challenge and they didn't. The girls are just, they're scared of me. So they were trying to bring me down. I feel like that's the making of like a villain arc.
Because at first, I think it really wanted us to resonate with her, like to like her, to feel her as a threat, but also as the underdog, as somebody that's been doing well in the competition, but has not been recognized by the other queens. Yes, but by the judges, but not by the other queens. But then it all started to change, and then she was also delusional, and then she was also a bit cocky, a bit arrogant, a bit, I don't know, fake, or so I really don't know.
So the episode starts out with her over all of these design challenges, and she just wants to be funny again. And so, lucky her, it is the Snatch Game episode. And immediately she tells the girls that she is going to be doing Ellen Green from Little Shop of Horrors. And it's a very kind of niche, I don't know, I want to say it's like the nichest thing in the world. Like most people have seen Little Shop, but when you say Ellen Green, it's not like a celebrity that everyone's like, oh, duh, like love her. But she's very confident. She says that she's won competitions, as this character in the past. She's talking a big game. And it's kind of set up that the other girls are like, oh, all right, queen, we'll see how you do because you're talking a lot of shit right now. Like, you better live up to the expectations that you're setting for yourself. And, that doesn't happen. and obviously, this is a challenge that she really wants to win. You know what I mean? She keeps saying she's the comedy queen. She loves to be funny. And this is the comedy challenge, like the comedy challenge. But from the edit that we've seen of this Snatch Game, she's doing this kind of joke about her voice and how she mispronounces scissors. And no one in the room is laughing, but Suzie isn't pivoting. And again, we don't see everything in Snatch Game, so who knows, like, the full gamut of what she did. But that is what the edit is telling us, that she talked a big game, and she did not deliver. When Snatch Game is over and they were back in the workroom talking about it, she's saying that she thinks she could win, she devoured, all of these things, and the queens jump on this opportunity to humble her. Sam Star walks all the way across the workroom just to say, you really surprised me, Suzie. And Susie's like, oh yeah? She's like, yeah, because I thought you'd be better. And I was like, oh! But basically, the second that the queens smelled blood in the water, they jumped at an opportunity to tear Suzie down a bit. But the edit has set it up so that it's a satisfying scene. You know what I mean? Like, we really went from Suzie being the underdog to her then being way too overconfident and immediately getting humbled. And I think that's what really started to confuse a lot of people with her edit because it was such a sudden shift. But it seems like that's just what happened on set. So, like, what can you do about that? And I do think that they laid the groundwork in previous episodes that Suzie is definitely confident in herself, but it could veer into overconfidence in the future. I feel like those red flags were given if you were looking for them. As someone who's really into musical theater and who really liked what Suzie did in the Snatch Game, that was like a huge moment when like she was like, oh, I'm gonna eat, and then the whole cast was like, you flopped. Do you feel like it was as bad as people said it was on the cast, or that people in the comments said?
No, I thought she embodied Ellen Green really well, and I thought she was giving a lot, and I don't know if Rue was necessarily falling with her. Like, I think they talked about it on IMHO, but I would love to see the unedited version of the Snatch Game without the sound effects, without the wah wah, like all that stuff. Because I thought like, I still say Deshisha today. Like, that is so funny to me. And if you've ever seen Ellen Green in Little Shop or just in like a live performance, like, she embodied her really well. And I feel like if Jinx had been doing that, she would have loved it. Right. And I could see like where people might think it was a little one note, but I feel like that's because they only showed us that one note. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like she probably did a million other choices. Like, Suzie's a theater girl, and you can tell when, like, theater people, you can understand when the audience is not getting it. You know what I mean? And you pivot and you adjust from there. And I know Suzie would be able to pick up on that.
But, they're all kind of making fun of how bad Suzie was. She's saying that her patience in all of this is really starting to chip away, which makes sense because, the last episode during Untucked, when they were all kind of coming for her, she was very, very mature about the whole thing. She could have easily gone off on everybody, but she didn't. But now that it's 2 weeks in a row, for her, both of them are unwarranted. She's starting to get a little bit annoyed. But what I think got her a lot of flack from this episode is some of the things she was saying about Onya Nurve, who played Eddie Murphy and was hilarious. She kind of starts to put Anya down. She's saying that, sure, Anya had the best reaction in the room, but she wasn't really giving much character. And after she's called safe and is given a little face crack moment, she then has a little bit of a tantrum in Untucked, saying that, she should have won. Anya doesn't deserve to win because Anya was playing herself, which that is, kind of a charged statement. And a lot of people were very upset with Suzie after saying this. But Anya and Suzie both made it very clear online that they had talked about this and they had, Suzie had apologized and they were absolutely fine. So people moved on, but for a hot minute there, they were really upset with how she was treating Anya after Anya was the only one to come to her defense the week prior. So this episode was not a good look for Suzie. This is an over the top negative episode for her, like down. And this edit continues into episode 8, where, she's still upset that she was safe in the Snatch Game, but she's like, well, hey, gave the girls another week to breathe. So she's like hoping to bounce back. She finds out that this was going to be the Rusical episode, and this is another thing that she is like known for, is musical theater. So she's really, really confident that she can take this week, and she does not want to lose her lead, as now her and Anya both have 2 wins. And so they're given the Wicked Wiz of Oz Rusical, and it is up to them to decide which parts they're going to get, and this is where things get intense for Suzie, because she's kind of leading the discussion. She's like, so we're going to go down the line and discuss, I want Kansas Dorothy. Like, from the jump, she jumps on what she wants, and the girls are not having it. They are not having it, especially after some of the delusion that she had last week. She kept going on and on and on about how she should not have been safe, how da-da-da, and everyone is just rolling their eyes. So at this point, I think everyone is pretty annoyed with Suzie, and they are set out to make sure that she does not get the part that she wants. And especially after she kind of has to put Acacia down to try and justify why she deserves the role, it also just isn't the best look in the world, and the edit definitely is highlighting that she is in the wrong here. They're showing all of Acacia's reactions and how she's kind of upset that Suzie was like, here, Acacia, you won't be good at this because you're da-da-da-da-da, instead of just saying why she deserved it. And basically everyone just unites and says, hey, Acacia hasn't gotten what she's wanted, and Suzie has gotten everything she's wanted, so sit down and shut up, Suzie. And Suzie's plucked by this, and there's this kind of awkward moment. And then for the rest of this episode, Suzie's just kind of like a little bit plucked. She's playing the Green Witch. She's trying to make the most of it. She's upset that Anya is doing so well. And in the end, she does get a high placement. She's not safe, but she doesn't take the win. And Sam Starr takes the win, which now makes her tied with both Anya and Sam in wins. So Suzie is no longer in the lead anymore. But after this, she does get a couple cool down episodes, because those were 2 pretty intense episodes for Suzie, and kind of negative episodes for Suzie. Episode 9 is another design challenge, and we really just don't focus on Suzie at all. Episode 10 is the roast, and Suzie does want to win this episode, but this is another one where she just ends up safe. But a lot of the conversation is more about how they're all expecting Suzie to do the best, and she's like, yeah, girls, like, that's me. I'm gonna kill it. And it's a big episode for Lexi, who is put after Suzie in the roast order and kind of has like a hissy fit over that because they're all so intimidated by. And this is the episode where everyone is fighting Jules over the order of the roast, and Suzie does come to Jules' side and kind of says how ridiculous it is. But there's really no stopping Lexi or Ariadne in this episode. Like, they're just pissed. So Suzie mostly stays out of it. The next couple of episodes, basically the rest of the episodes from the season, we get a lot of Suzie content. Episode 11 is the Ross Matthews versus the Ducks acting challenge, which I don't think anybody liked. But this is another time where they have to fight for roles, and Suzie wants this Chicago monologue role. And Jules also wants it, and kind of like she did with Acacia, she does somewhat kind of put Jules down to try and justify why she deserves it. She's like, if we want this to be the best it can be, then I should be the one that does it. And the queens are kind of like, no, you don't just get to have whatever you want, because you're already a threat to us, and we need to make sure that you're not getting a role that you really, really, really want. So they don't give her what she wants. She does handle it very, very well, and she just kind of rolls with the punches, which I think is a great thing that she does. She does get these roles that she doesn't want, but then she doesn't throw a hissy fit like, Aja. She is like, how can I make this work? And how can I still be in the top with this role? Which she is.
But I liked how Suzie reacted to the cast not liking her. Because, like, for example, Lucy, a couple of seasons ago, was feeling very, very like offended and attacked and took it very personally. But I like that Suzie was keeping it like more like, I get it. It's a competition. I get it that like not all of you might understand my drag. And she also said that. But she was, more like calmer.
Maybe because they're so young, I think this whole group of drag queens that was on this season, obviously, like there's been the comments of like, oh, they're so young. They're a lot of them haven't been doing drag for so long either. I think they are seeing what Rue likes in in Susie when it comes to like uniqueness, quirkiness, making her laugh in a lot of instances. I think they were kind of seeing a lot of similarities to like past winners, like a Willow Pill, a Jinx Monsoon, a Nymphia Wind, even like most recently. So I think because of like how unique she was and the perspective that she brought was so different in comparison to other seasons, they were like, this girl, this Suzie Toot, she is an evil. Like she's evil. She's gonna steal that crown right off, like right from underneath us.
I really don't know what they think of her. I feel like in the show, they're like, oh, we love you, Queen. We're like, oh, we're just scared of you. I feel like they kind of play into like, oh, we're just like scared of you. But I feel like they're not really vibing with her like they are with everyone else.
And this is the episode where RuPaul asks who should go home tonight and why. And everybody except for Anya and maybe one other person say Suzie should go home. And this is like a really interesting moment for her because I think in this moment she had every right to go off on these girls, and she doesn't. I think she handles it super, super well. But it's clear that everyone thinks she is the biggest threat. Everyone is trying as much as they can to get her out. But I do think, like, while it must be annoying, it also is probably really, like, empowering to know that, like, you have everyone in the room so pressed because you're just that good. And that's kind of the way that Suzie takes it. And she kind of mentions later on that she knows the girls like her as a person. They just don't want her to win the season and want to get her out by any means necessary. So I will say that Suzie could have gone like full villain, reputation era here, and she doesn't. And I think that's really indicative of like the end of her arc. Like I feel like she starts as the underdog, then she's kind of the big threat, then she's the delusional villain, but then she kind of evens out into this place of like maybe she's sometimes a little bit overconfident and maybe a little bit delusional, but I still think the edit wants us to like her. She's sticking up for herself the next episode, episode 12, saying, like, that's stupid that you guys said me. That's not what they were asking. But everyone is just kind of like, girl, whatever. Like they're just not going to, like, hear her out at this point. Well, she has gotten a lot of, like, comparisons to Jinx. But what do you think the differences are between Suzie and Jinx?
Well, I think the differences are that they fully leaned into the underdog edit with Jinx. And I feel like RuPaul just resonated with Jinx's sense of humor more than Suzie's. I really resonate with Suzie's sense of humor, and I get all of her, I get the Ellen Green of it all, and I get the, even in this past challenge, the Vegas one, I liked all her anything goes references. Like I thought that was funny, but I don't think Rue found it funny. Whereas I think everything Jinx did, Rue just cackled over.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the four like theater queens that come into my brain are like you said, Jan and Plasma and Jinx and Suzie, and I feel like Jan and Suzie have a lot in common, and then Plasma and Jinx had a lot in common, and Rue definitely got Plasma and Jinx better than Jan and Suzie.
Sure, I think you just have to be a ginger, and then Rue will
Honestly,
understand.
yes.
That's why I dyed my hair, actually. Yeah. No.
This is like a really big episode for Suzie because this is the monologue interpretive dance episode where she gets partnered with Jewel Sparkles and they are a team, and one of them will be telling a story while the other does an interpretive dance. And, we're seeing all of the other teams kind of working together and trying to make this as fun as possible. And it's juxtaposed with Suzie trying to choreograph Jules's part of the challenge, where, you know, Susie's telling her story, and this would be Jules's moment to, like, make it her own while she dances. But instead, Suzie is, like, choreographing every single moment and shooting down Jules's ideas and telling her, let's not do this, and da-da-da-da. And this is kind of harkening back to, you know, when she was talking to Lexi and Crystal about the RDR Live. And, you know, we see some of that kind of control that Suzie really wants to have in everything that goes on. And Jules is definitely not having it and is very over it. And I think it's setting up why Suzie doesn't succeed super well in this challenge, because this is a challenge about letting go. This is a challenge about just, like, being completely free and stupid and silly. And Suzie is taking it about as serious as, like, I was going to say Congress meeting, but those are honestly a clown show. So something else. A speaker at the library or something like that. And I think it's really showing why she wasn't able to make it to the very end and win this season. I think it is because she takes everything so seriously that she doesn't know when to kind of take her foot off the pedal just a little bit. I think that is what the edit of this episode is trying to set up for us. And it's kind of like the precursor of why she goes home. Even Onya Nurve is like, Suzie is just too damn serious. Like, this is a fun challenge. Just let go. But she is not able to do that. They're critiqued about how their dances and stuff were just a little bit too serious. But again, we get into Untucked, and Suzie doesn't really care about what the judges were looking for because she thinks she did the best. And she's kind of like, hey, Lexi and Anya, you guys are going to win, but I do think that me and Jules did the best. And it's kind of just another, like, okay, Suzie. And she'll always preface things like, I don't want to, like, bring you guys down, or, like, I'm not trying to, like, tear anyone down, but then she'll be, like, propping herself up and saying she's better than the person that she's talking about. It's something that she did throughout the season, and you could tell that it affected people, especially, like, Acacia. Like, it really affected Acacia when she did it. But I do think this episode also shows some, like, humanness in Suzie, because she talks about how they're asking about, like, oh, like, what is something that, like, you don't even want to, like, joke about? And she's like, well, alcoholism is hard, like, making jokes about drinking, because she grew up in that environment. And she really doesn't delve deep into this, you know? Like, a lot of queens, like Lexi Love, for example, will tell, like, the whole story. You know, they'll get into the dirty details and they'll talk about what they learned from it. But Suzie doesn't do that. She kind of just mentions it, that it was a thing, and then doesn't go any deeper. Which is fine. Not everyone needs to put their entire business on TV. But I do think that she was guarded while she was there and, you know, while the cameras were rolling. And I think that's another reason why maybe she didn't get as close as some of the other girls did to the cast. And then we'll see this more in the next episode as well, which is the Makeover, where she kind of does get a little bit deeper, but still doesn't go actually all the way in explaining, you know, her situation in life with her mother. She does say that everyone else seems to have a really closer bond with their parent than she does, and she just doesn't have that, like, super, super close bond with her mother. And we see that in their interactions. We see that in how they speak to each other. But it does seem that, like, Suzie was a little bit guarded still. And I understand you don't want to, like, air out all your mom's tea while she's literally going to be watching the episode. And, like, a million or so people are going to be judging her, as they already were, even without all of the context. So I completely understand why. But I think that's another reason why maybe she didn't get as much screen time in some of these episodes. Like, in this season, Susie's either the main character of the episode or barely in it at all. And I think it's because, unlike Lexi, unlike Anya, unlike some of these Jules, she isn't spilling her entire life story. But again, even in an episode like this where the main focus is Suzie and her mother kind of not having a close bond, they're still highlighting, like, I don't want to say delusional, but just, like, idiosyncrasies in how Suzie goes about things, because they very clearly showed a scene where Jules is like, do you like this wig, Dad? Do you like this wig, Dad? And Anya's like, how do you feel about this? And they're showing that, like, the other competitors are really trying to make their parents as comfortable as possible. And then it cuts to Suzie putting tape all over her mom's head and making her a Mickey Mouse headpiece. And everyone's like, wow, her mom is miserable and Suzie doesn't even care. And it's just like interesting how they will juxtapose how the queens are going about things, and they always tend to show that Suzie will be taking control of this situation and doing what she wants. And that leads us to her last episode, which is episode 14. This is the Vegas show, like audition, basically. And she is going to bring back her tapping. She's going to bring back her 1920s moment and like make it bigger and grander. And everyone else is kind of like not vibing. They're like, that's not a good idea, but whatever, girl. She does her photo shoot with RuPaul, and RuPaul's like, so have you ever thought about going to Vegas? And Suzie's like, no. And RuPaul's like, right. And we see that Suzie admits to having troubles during photo shoots. And I think that's because Suzie isn't able to just like fully let go. You know, it's like kind of bringing back to the monologues. Like she couldn't just take something like a little less seriously. Even the Snatch Game. Like I feel like if she would have let go just a little bit more in Snatch Game, she could have done better. But instead she just went based off of her like preconceived, here's exactly what I'm going to do. And then, you know, we see during the interview with Latrice Royale, you know, Latrice is like, what's your worst quality? And Suzie's like, well, I'm unique, but I am the full package. And that's like saying on a job interview that your worst quality is that you work too hard. You know what I mean? And so this episode really was highlighting all of the things that maybe Suzie had been lacking in, the areas that she was lacking in where the other queens were just doing a better job in, and then using that as the justification of like, here's why she went home. The issue is the judges have never brought up any of these things except in the monologue challenge where they were like, you could have let go a little bit more. So it did feel a little bit jarring when the judges were like, here's why you flopped every single part of this challenge. But if you're paying attention to the edits, you've seen those clues that it's coming. But I do think in critiques, we could have gotten a couple comments just to kind of prime the audience better. Because not everyone is sitting here breaking apart an edit like I am. A lot of people are just watching the show to have fun. They're not insane like I am. Do you feel like Suzie was robbed?
I really think that the critics in the last episodes weren't that like valid for her. Like I just think she was chosen to be in the bottom two. Maybe she was also like not with the intention of sending her home, but also the lip sync was very neck and neck. So they could have chosen her to stay instead of Sam, but they chose not to. So I really don't know.
I don't want to say robbed. I think her last episode, this episode she was the bottom. Like it was very clear as a Suzie Toot. Like I love her all my heart and I enjoyed her throughout the season. This episode really was not hers. I think it was judged fairly as a Suzie Toot fan. It's sad because like I think like most of us, we thought Suzie was going to go to the top. Like she was going to be like in the finale.
I guess I do kind of feel like she was robbed because I just wanted her to be in the finale. Like my top three are Onya, Suzie, and Lexi for sure. Like, and I love Jules too, so I saw her up there in the top four as well. But I just feel like to be a winner, you should be original, you know? And no shade to Sam, but I just feel like she still is finding out who she is, you know? And Suzie was so sure of who she is. And that for me is like more of a winner. And I do feel like in that lip sync, she was giving a lot of emotion. And that resonated with me as well. So I feel like she was like, I can understand why she was in the bottom that episode. But to me, she kind of won the lip sync. So I guess she was like maybe like 75% robbed.
But again, it's a mixed bag of an episode for Suzie because, you know, we're seeing that she can't let go. We're seeing all the reasons why she goes home this episode. But then we see her, you know, really having fun and getting along with the girls and being like, you know, I know that they poke fun at me, but I know it's out of love and I love everyone on this cast and da-da-da. And we're seeing that there is a sisterhood forming. But then Suzie goes home and in her final messages, she says, "Good luck, girls. Your crown is tainted by the fact that it should have been mine." And that's just where it's like, it's the dichotomy of Suzie Toot. Because, yes, she is super funny and super fun and charismatic, and you can tell that she can kind of key with the girls. But then on the other hand, she is a little bit maybe delusional at times about how well she was doing. And she can be overconfident, and she tends to put others down while trying to build herself up. And I completely understand where that comes from, because if she is from a scene, if she is from, in school or whatever, where she was constantly being put down, it can feel very cathartic to stand up for yourself and put those people down that were doing the same thing to you. But the issue comes where, this is a reality TV show and everyone's just kind of having fun and they're playing a game and they're trying to make sure that Suzie is not going to overtake them. But I think that is also why there is such a disparate reaction to Suzie, because there is kind of two sides to her edit. And if the people are honing in on and focusing on the kind of underdog aspects of the edit, then they're going to love Suzie. But if you're honing in on, some of the overconfidence, a little bit of the drag delusion, then you won't like Suzie as much. And I think that's where my friend group, my sister and everyone that we watched with, like that, those are the things that we were honing in on. But I completely understand why other people would be honing in on the positive. So again, I love rooting against people on TV, and Suzie was so fun to root against every single week. That doesn't mean I dislike her as a person. I would absolutely see her show. I would absolutely tip her. And I think that she gave one of the most complex, interesting edits that we've seen in the last couple seasons. So as someone who loves reality TV, who loves a villain, who loves conflict, I truly appreciate everything that Suzie brought to this season. And I'm really glad that she resonated with so many fans.
I feel like she isn't accepting of her true villain arc. So that makes me kind of shy away from even more. I'm like, if you're gonna be a villain and accept it.
Diabetes is one of your favorite queens of all time.
Since day one.
You love a villain.
I do. And I love that she knew what her role was in the season. She's like, I knew what this edit is gonna give me. I'm gonna embrace it right now. And I'm going to ride with it.
So you feel like Suzie maybe thought she was the hero of the narrative?
I think in her storytelling of the book, in her chapter, that's what she's writing herself as the narrator, yes.
I think she's going to have a wonderful career after this. I think she's basically a shoo-in for All Stars, and I don't think this season would be even half as good if Suzie Toot was not there. So, Suzie Toot, thank you for everything that you brought to this season. You let me have an hour-long video just dissecting all of it. So that is dissecting the edit of Suzie Toot on season 17. We are in the final stretch. Make sure you are tuning into the Rigged Recap every week with Kayla Says and I as we break down these last few episodes. The riggery of season 17 will be coming. I can't believe I'm saying that. This season flew by. I feel like it's because there was a Cleveland queen on, so like I don't know, having like stake in the game, it's different and I like it. And now I'm like, Pineapple, you better get on. Omega, you better get on. Dakota Cox, you better get on. Like, Cleveland needs to get on again because this was so much fun. And I would love to hear your respectful thoughts on Suzie Toot in the comments down below. The links to all of my social media as well as Thumali's social media will be in the description down below. Follow all of my fun guests on Instagram. And thank you again to Rocket Money for sponsoring today's video. Onya Nurve for the crown, and I will see you all in the next one.